All right. Well, very good day. Welcome to all of you for today's session. This is about TPS software, and I have invited a guest, Ted Chandro, to the session today. I'm Randy Johnston. We'll get the introductions here in just a minute, but I wanted to talk about this product in terms of its strategic position because I think it can help you grow and manage your accounting practice. And there's a lot of value in these types of platforms as I see it, but I like the way this one works well. Now, you should know that I've reviewed lots of products, 48 to actually be exact. So I think I've got a pretty good grasp on the marketplace. But today we're going to focus around how to grow your practice and some of the features you should look at in any of the practice management products that you'd consider out there. We're going to spend some effort around helping you understand practice management features. I am going to also cover a few of the integrations that are in TPS. Not all practice management products have those class of integrations, it turns out. I'd like for you to understand scheduling methodologies. Again, a surprising number of practice management products don't have scheduling at all, but TPS has both calendar and grid views to get this done. And one of the innovations that they've done this year is creating a Power BI dashboard that's drillable, which is a really nifty feature. We're aware of at least two other products that are trying to get there with that type of capability. This one's a very well done product. So we're going to talk about some of the software changes in TPS, some of the technology options you might have for your firm, and some specific features that you can improve productivity and profitability with, whether you do it on TPS, whether you do it with something else. Part of the reason I like to have you along for these type of sessions is you can learn how things are done in a best practices type of methodology, and that there are a lot of strategic features to consider for implementation. I want you to run your practices the way you'd like to run them. And I think, some of these products can really do a good job on that. So again, I'm Randy Johnston out of Hutchinson, Kansas. I've been on the top 25 thought leader list since 2011 and on the Accounting Today top 100 list since 2004. So I do write technology columns for the CPA Practice Advisor on a monthly basis. I've written quite a few books, most college level texts through the years. I have a website at randyjohnston.com. You're certainly welcome to look there. And I am one of two partners in K2 Enterprises, and you can look at our websites for supporting information there. But I have invited along Ted Chandro. Now, I've known Ted for quite a few years, 15 plus probably. And, he's one of the developers and founders on the TPS software product. So, Ted, if you don't mind doing an introduction on yourself, I think that'd be better, please.
Sure. I've been doing practice management software for accounting firms, specifically for accounting firms, not lawyers, not anybody else. Actually, since Wang mini computers, which is an awful long time. And then, of course, we went to the IBM XT, DOS, and then, of course, Windows. So I've been dealing with accounting time and billing programs for a very, very, very long time. And we started up TPS after selling out our other product. I don't know if I should mention the name who we sold it to. No, I won't.
You can. It's
Okay.
done. It's in the past. It's like Lion King. It's in the past.
It was CCH. You were using the product I originally developed if you were doing it in the early 2000s. And then we started this other one because we felt nobody was really addressing the small to mid-sized business practice very well. And so that was the genesis of TPS, and we've since moved on, and we've ended up getting bigger in both practice and practice size that we cater to and the things we do for them. So that's what it.
Yeah. I appreciate the background. In fact, I hadn't heard Wang mini computers in a long time. Our listeners today probably should know both of us been around the block once or twice. And, I used to work on what I called IBM and the Seven Dwarfs. And one of my business partners in the 80s was the Wang dealer for Wichita, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri, and St. Louis, Missouri. So I've been on those same Wang mini computers probably. But it was fun being in the host mainframes, then down in the mini computers, and then down into local area networks. And I did meet Ted because of that sellout on the CCH practice management product. And, they built, I think, even a superior product. So some of those of you who might be along that are CCH practice management users today, I think this product's matured much more rapidly. Well, just a little bit of background and administrative things, and then we'll get into, our discussion today. Obviously, you can listen to our podcast for free, and many of you are on right now listening to us. We appreciate you being here live. We're live twice a week at 11 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesdays and Fridays, and then we're streaming to Facebook and YouTube. Our podcasts are designed to do reviews, analysis, and training on topics from the latest and greatest mobile apps to detailed Excel tutorials and so forth. On a lot of products, we will actually do executive interviews like today's session, and then we'll demonstrate the product in another session. So that's a pretty common strategy for us. But we are trying to make sure you've got the latest and greatest technology, accounting, and business knowledge available to you in this podcast series. So earning credits today is quite simple. Those of you attending live will obviously be able to take our questions as we go. And if you're doing it, in fact, I think the first question is headed your way right now. We'll have 4 questions over the time together. So the first one should be in and up for you. If you're doing this as a self-study, you'll need to take a short 5-question quiz afterward. You will get a completion certificate through K2 Enterprises. I'm one of the K2 partners, and we're NASBA certified. So this will be NASBA certified CPE. You do have the ability to download the presentation deck today, and we would love to have you ask us questions. So, Ted and I are in a position that if we see the question come in, we'll try to handle it. And of course, you can get more information on this course as TPS 1, as it turns out today. And if this is your first podcast with us, you can just use the code ONEFREEPODCAST to get credit in future. And of course, since you're listening live, you'll be able to get the credits as we go today. There are going to be 4 of these questions, one of which is live right now. We try to do one about every 12 to 20 minutes. So you just need to confirm your attendance, and the system tracks your response. And so by choosing a response, that confirms it. And I may or may not announce the attendance prompts. I usually have a habit of doing that because we want you to get the credit. You're spending the time here anyway. And we will send that certificate to you if you answer 3/4, 75% of it, usually within 2 days, sometimes a little quicker. But in any case, visit the CPE Today site if you have a question on that. And you can see again the website in the link below. Now, we also ask you to complete an evaluation immediately after the podcast. I read those and we try to adjust and improve our content every step of the way. The evaluation should be very short, 1 to 3 minutes, we think. Your feedback's so important. We just ask you to take a time to complete that online evaluation. We are absolutely here to help, and we want you to ask away. If you have questions, let us know, and we'll try to handle it the best we can. A lot of times I'll use examples or talk about other experience on that. Further, we know that some of you have experience, knowledge, and insight, and I often pick that up. I had a very interesting conversation earlier today with a Thompson practitioner, and we talked about several of the things in the practice, the CS suite. So in any case, if you have technical issues, use the chat or Q&A functionality to ask for help, and our team will try to help you there the best we can. Now, beyond that, any product names and logos and brands are the copyright of their respective owners. This session is for educational use only, and the image credits come from either Flat Icon or Unsplash along the way. So we are here to talk about TPS software in specific, and the reason I asked Ted to come along is we believe that TPS understands the professional market and has designed their practice management exclusively for professional accountants. You kind of heard Ted say that in his introduction. As TPS, they've been serving professional accountants for more than 20 years in the US and Canada. They've been at the forefront of technology since its inception. You can hear Wang mini computers. Ted probably doesn't know this about me, but I started programming in 1961. So it's hard to believe I've been programming for over 60 bloody years, Ted, but that's the way it works. And we think TPS is very responsive to the needs of its clients. We believe they have among the best support in the profession today. And, along the way, I just think they're one of the best. So that's the reason I'm happy to talk about them. Now, we believe that as accounting firms, you have many different needs, but three major needs are a simple way to manage time and billing and ways to manage work that needs to be done. And we think it's actually good to get business development managed in a CRM that has a way to analyze that data as well. Now, again, we think there's lots of different things that we could put in here, workflows and portals and, so forth. I probably could name 7 features instead of just 3. But I wanted to keep it simple enough here, Ted. So from your perspective, what do you hear people asking for? What do you see as their primary needs when they're trying to manage their firms?
I think, like you say, it varies from firm to firm, and you've hit some key points here. From the point of view of how I see it evolving, I see definitely, it used to be strictly time and billing management and getting the invoices and so forth and getting reports. Definitely the last several years have evolved much more into workflow management, making sure that the jobs are visible to be done, who's doing them, and what stage they're at. The area that we think TPS is leading the way a little bit is the CRM area, where that we, stating this, we view accounting firms, generally speaking, I'm not trying to be derogatory here, but we view them as generally being reactive rather than proactive with their clients. And so we believe that using your client database as a CRM, you can get in front of the clients, in front of what is happening, and it makes them feel more like a more progressive and proactive client. So maybe a sample of that might be maybe a tax law changes that would affect an identifiable group of your clients. You could run a mass mailer or emailer to those clients and saying, hey, by the way, this tax law has changed. You should be aware of it and take advantage of it. Whereas a reactive firm would wait till their year end, they brought in their data and then say, oh, by the way, you could have taken advantage of this last year. So just getting in front of your clients ahead of time and being more proactive with them, we believe is part of the best practice way to go.
Yeah, it makes great sense, Ted. In fact, I'm thinking here in context of the major law that was signed off this past week in the U.S. There are going to be pretty notable tax law changes in there as I've been trying to understand all the implications. And some will affect businesses and some will affect individuals. So that's certainly implied. And I think you know me well enough. I've been promoting workflow in CPA firms for actually at this point, right at 30 years. I think I started pushing on that pretty hard about 1992. And I know that it makes partners more profitable, less balls get dropped, and frankly, there's less pressure inside the office. So that was part of the reason I picked that workflow too. And I would say in the last 18 months on the technology consulting I've done into CPA firms, workflow and portals and, the basic ease of use for client experience and team member experience because of the fairly large scale, we'll call it great resignation, great retirements that are happening. Sure. There seems to be less and less talent available for a lot of CPA firms. In fact, I had one of those calls this morning also, and it was pretty clear that the technology might be a lever for us in this area. Now, I consider really time and billing to be quite fundamental, but I'm appalled, at least I will maybe say this statistically, For 8 years, I've run an accounting firm operations and technology survey, which is statistically valid across the US market. And I'm amazed how many firms don't even have time and billing software. They're trying to run bills out of their tax software, or they're mocking them up in a Word document, or they're trying to do it out of QuickBooks or something else. And, to me, time and billing is pretty fundamental. Now, I think you will appreciate, um, I still actually keep time, even though a lot of people say throw away the timesheet. I keep time because it allows me to cost my activities. And I was current to the minute when I, got ready to do this podcast today. And that has through the years paid off very well. We'll talk more about that a little later in the session. But, billing for all the services rendered, even if a task only takes a couple of minutes, is a pretty big deal. Both Gary Boomer and I suggested quite some time ago in the past, he and I actually agreed on the principle that if you don't track time and bill it almost right away, the value of the billing diminishes greatly after the service is performed.
Yeah.
And if you don't keep track of time as it goes, it's easy to have a lot of time slip out. We estimated 25% through the years.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is the vendors' products are sometimes clumsy to keep track of those things. So, what have you observed in this billing approach, Ted?
Well, getting back to just from the point of view of time and billing and other people telling you to throw away your timesheets and stuff, the fundamental problem with time and billing, implementing it is, in all the years I've been doing this, I've never met anybody who likes doing their timesheet. It's one of those things nobody really likes to do, but you got to get over it. But many of our current clients come to us because they went to the value bill type approach, and we can define value bill approach, where they're just stating a fee. But at the end of the day, they're often saying, well, I don't know really how much money I made on this or not. I know I'm working hard, but I don't really know. So it all gets back to how much resources is your firm putting into any particular job that you're doing. Second thing, I talk to several hundred accounting firms a year, and what I see pretty much right across North America is people don't care if you use a time clock, a stopwatch type of recording, if you keep a scratch pad, if you enter it throughout the day. But pretty much the rule of thumb right across North America is, guys, before you shut off your computer and go home, you should have your timesheet entered. If you don't, for sure, you're forgetting time. You're not recording stuff. So I will emphasize them that if you use a stopwatch or clock, it does require a lot of discipline. It might be the best way to enter time, but it's very difficult for a lot of people. So many firms are just happy the fact that they do enter it daily. If you get interrupted a lot, a stopwatch, we tried to build it so that in our particular program, so that you can get interrupted, start, repeat multiple times. But it is a bit of a pain for many people who lack that discipline to do that.
Yeah, that makes good sense, Ted. And I've actually taught people lots of different mechanical tricks to capture time that way. And I'm probably a little less worried about the granularity, although I've illustrated in our presentation with 2 minutes. But I also know that I had to have the time to do my costing. And further, I notice on myself, I pick up hundreds. I think it might be a little overstatement to say thousands of dollars a week, but I clearly pick up hundreds of dollars a week. So let's keep it simple and say it's only $200 times 52. It's not a lot of money, but that's money that would have gone out the door. And when you take my team of 40 people, if 40 times, a couple $100 per hour, that's real money, I think. Yeah. So now the other thing too is keeping invoices simple unless they're asked for details. We think that's pretty important. Just a summary invoice. Most clients trust you. They get it. We're not lawyers detail billing, but if they want the details, being able to do that's important. And you should have the details readily available if you're specifically asked for them. But most clients won't bother you for that. So that, again, we think good summary invoices are fine. And then, if they call and have a question, you can pop it up and say, oh yeah, let me send you a detail invoice, or let me talk to you about the details.
Yeah.
But Go
If I
ahead.
could, if I could add to that, Randy, you're absolutely right. Most accounting firms will send a paragraph style invoice out, and if details are necessary, of course, they'll follow. Now, we still come across a number of people, not a lot, but a number of people that do the detail. We call it the legal invoice, where they list everything. And part of, I think, the reason is psychological. They don't want to argue with the client. So if they show everything that's there, that's fine. But fundamentally, what differentiates an accounting firm from a law firm is when an accounting firm looks at the WIP and makes a billing decision, they write it up or write it down, they fully expect to get 100% of that bill back. A law firm will throw everything and the kitchen sink at you and then argue about the bill after the fact. So that's why law firms detail it, and it makes them fundamentally different than the way an accounting firm tends to operate.
That's good insight, and I appreciate that. And bottom line here is we think it's good to clearly communicate with your clients and bill for that communication time as well. And so again, we're not saying run your practice this way. We're just making some suggestions. But I can tell you that last week I completed a tech assessment, and the client confirmed that they received the written report on the assessment. And I had generated the bill with all associated time captured within 10 minutes after the client confirmed it, and they had the bill within 15.
That's perfect.
So, and by the way, they paid the bill within 24 hours.
Right.
So, again, I'm not asking people to pay quickly, but I do note that when we bill quickly, we tend to get paid more rapidly and so forth. And again, not today. You've done this in your product with at least 2 features that I'm aware of, but on another day, we could talk a lot more about how to incorporate payment, delivery of work product and payment of product and all that. That's all a big deal. But we are quite cognizant of the impacts of underbilling. If you set an undervalued price point for yourself and everybody else in the industry, that's bad. I actually went through the Accounting Today survey of the rates charged for tax returns, considered putting that in here because it was so appalling. But I've got it in my tax workflow course this year. I am just amazed at how cheap tax returns are done in this country. And it leads actually to a misconception. You're not as skilled as your competitors. Most CPAs that I know are quite skilled. And frankly, it also forces you to take on more clients to be profitable. At least that's one of the levers that often happens. So when I listen to people working too hard, I actually question if they're charging enough, or what the factor is that's causing them to work so bloody hard.
Yeah,
So do you see other impacts of underbilling, Ted?
Yeah, I think part of it though could be addressed by what we call realization reports. And again, it's basically, your WIP is hours times your charge out rate. That gives you WIP at standard, but can you build a WIP at standard? So if you're taking a markdown, your realization's impacted. But what we built into our software, by the way, everybody should run that at least once a year in their clients to see which clients are underbilling on. However, another way to analyze it is to have your work identifiable work type set up so that you can go down and you can say, well, I'm making good money on reviews, not doing really well in tax consultation or compilation work. So I don't think a lot of people analyze. They subjectively know where they're making more money, and sometimes they have to take on work that they know is not very profitable to keep the client. But I don't think they analyze it. And what I'm seeing now a little bit is you get some boutique practices that have realized that and focus on the areas they know they can make the most money on.
Yeah, that makes sense. While you're talking about that, I'm going to go ahead and launch the second question of the day, which the following billing features are included in TPS: detailed bills, summary bills, value-added bills, or all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
And, we haven't told you the details about the products, but, Ted, I know you've got more than this inside your product style and so forth. Obviously, we've talked about the detailed bills capability. But, I will just set this conversation up by saying I was recently in a firm within the last 4 weeks of this podcast where the partners didn't understand their realization by client. and they had some really good clients with realization numbers that were pathetic who also were collection problems. And it's like, so explain to me why you think this is a good client, when I was going through some of that detail with them. And, it was kind of a conversation. But, today I believe that, detailed bills, we try to really recommend you use summary bills or some sort of a value added or flat rate billing. Are there other billing types that are inside TPS, Ted?
Well, yes, in the sense, how you do a detailed bill really determines the reports you get back. So an example I'll use, and I often pose this question to accounting firms that I'm dealing with, is you've got 3 people working on a file. 2 of them did a good job. 1 of them kind of didn't do a very good job. Would you ever consider allocating the write down to the person that didn't do a good job? And I would have to say that often draws a long pause, and probably 90% maybe have thought about it, but didn't realize the impact it would have. So, and again, you're talking firms mostly above 10 or 15 people, because they tend to use more employee metrics on that. If you've got 3 people in your firm, you kind of know how good everybody is and where they're going. So, but still, it's a way to do it.
Yeah. And, we've talked about that, Ted, with firms where compensation models are driving behaviors. And notice if in fact you've got people whose skills need to be improved, if it affects their compensation, maybe it'd help there. So I did notice, Arden, your question about the CPE question. So our team will handle that on the side there for you. So I just want to call out that we believe the correct answer here is all the above, and there's actually more methodologies inside TPS, as it turns out. But, part of what we were hoping to accomplish in our time with you today is we want to talk a little bit about how to manage firm work, because remember, we're trying to help you grow your practice profitably. And I think good management software helps your team be more productive. Your team will make fewer mistakes. It'll increase your billable hours. And I think you can serve clients better and meet the deadlines that are out there. I watch a lot of firms frantically struggle with due dates. And I think it's vitally important in this post-pandemic remote work world. Actually, an associate of mine sent me a very interesting article on the quitting while working issue that's going on, where people are actually doing remote work, but they're trying to do as little work as possible without getting fired. It was really a fascinating article. I read the whole bloody thing saying, oh, that would explain a lot. In any case, but practice management software should help you build, manage, and complete your workflows in a timely basis. And there are several good competitors to TPS that are doing that workflow well. And I admire what they're doing, because getting the work in and getting it out the door in a timely fashion is a big deal in firms. And your practice management should track your client workflow, your due date, the team tasks, the calendars, everything in one place, in my mind. And there's so few products that do that well today. So, Ted, do you have other observations? I mean, we've got 3 slides worth of managing firm work.
Yeah, I think the other thing that people aren't seeing very often in workflow is I use the term capacity planning, so that you can see what jobs are assigned to an individual for example, a given month, and see how many hours those jobs are. Now, it's not really precise, because sometimes there's a little bit of other person's time in there as well, but it gives you a very close approximation of it. Getting back to one of your earlier comments on the hard work and anxiety that accountants feel, the one thing that I've heard repeatedly that will wake an accountant up in the middle of the night is, holy crumb, did I forget to miss this deadline? And so that's why due dates are probably the most critical from a pain point of view, but from a management point of view, workflow sort of becomes more and more important. But the first step is, I never want to miss a deadline that's going to hurt.
Yeah, that's a great perspective on that, Ted. And, I have been teaching in our tax workflow course this year, capacity planning, so people can actually have the right number of people to get the work done without killing themselves. That's really the way I talk about that. And, I've done that with my own operation for quite a number of years. people can't understand why our realization is so high and how our people actually work normal work weeks. So, there's some other things we think that practice management software should do, and it should allow tasks to be assigned to specific employees, be able to pool work or push it to somebody with the right talent here. And then once the tasks are complete, they should be automatically sent to the next employee for approval to complete the next step in the process. Just happens. And, you don't get that, for example, in something like a Thompson's Practice CS checklist. It's just, they don't have that capability.
Well, we took a different approach of virtually everybody that out there, and you would know better than I do. When employee A finishes a job, if they have this ability, they send an email to employee B. We said no. We get way too many emails anyways. So we have a notification area in our desktop that lets the employee know they have it. But what we did on that is we also put in a thing so we know they've read it. So if you send an email and that person didn't read it, that job's not getting done. So we have it there so we can also monitor whether or not they read that next step in the job.
I thought I knew your product pretty well, but I actually didn't know about the actually read it thing. And, a rule I've applied for a long time, if your workflow is working right in a firm, you don't need email inside the firm. Email is for communicating outside the firm. And I suspect a bunch of our listeners today are sending emails inside the firm. How about this? How about that? How about this? That should all be in your workflow if you've got the right workflow system. And, that's almost a little overstated, but you get the attitude.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to mention about what tasks should be assigned specific employees. I see this when they set up their jobs, projects, engagements, whatever you want to call them, that it varies a little bit, but for the most part, the jobs are set up on a recurring basis, monthly, quarterly, or yearly, and they don't assign the employees ahead of time by and large because they don't know when they're there. And I think that's the most common. Where I see them pre-signing employees, an accounting firm will have a specific bookkeeper. So fine, assign the employee specifically that bookkeeper, and you can do it. But it usually, one of the key components of the workflow module is having a box date received. When did it come in? Because at that point, you're now going to find out if there's missing work, and at that point, somebody's got to manage it to assign it to an employee. So that's kind of an important part. The due dates will tell you what's there, but now you got a little bit of work to do to make sure you've monitored that it's been received and then that it's been assigned.
Yeah, in fact, I've spent a lot of effort in the last 18 months around PBC automation, portal automation, and I've concluded years ago that you're far better off having all the documentation before you start engagement or a project, but it's a trouble to get it in from the clients. I mean, that's a devil of a thing to manage. In fact, we like software that's added the auto nag feature that it follows up with the client for you automatically and nags them about getting what you'd requested. But this whole issue about practice management, being able to understand the workflow of a task, who's responsible for each step, because that's another piece that's important here as we see it. You got to have accountability. So you got to have somebody responsible. And, practice management software, we think, should also include a real clean workflow audit trail. Again, this is more of a management issue. Are there other things in this area, Ted, that you think are important to note?
Well, I think one area that I think we do well in TPS is our linkage to emails after having said everything that we don't want more emails. What happens if you're analyzing a particular job and it's not going right? So you're not going to analyze a job that went right. So you're going to go look at analyze a job that didn't go right. One of the questions is, what did the employee do to rectify the situation? And I would want to look at all the emails that were related to that job. And that's something we've done in TPS, so that did the employee ask for the stuff that made him wait for 6 days? That kind of thing. So we are kind of giving you a better background, not just an audit trail, but an audit trail showing as well any emails that might have occurred on the client on the particular job.
Yeah, and a little later in our time together, we're going to talk about how Outlook, plays into this. So you got a two-way synchronization into that, so you can pick up those emails pretty seamlessly, which is a big deal. And realistically, we like automatic time tracking capabilities. There's a lot of passive timers out there, and you've got a variety of timers in your product, but we think that allows us to get billing thresholds to be applied, and we can manage labor hours or costs by clients because once all the work's done, it's a heck of a time to try to manage the costs of a project that's going to have overruns. You need to know
Mhm,
a lot as you're going, and
mhm.
we understand that time tracking really helps analyze how long the projects are taking, and if those projects are, you know, I'll say worth the time, but if there's going to be overruns. And we think it also helps play a critical role in identifying the employees that needs the most help. See, sometimes we haven't trained an employee enough, and we actually can spot deficiencies in their skill sets and train them. And having done tech assessments in firms for 40 plus years, it is real common, almost 100% of the time, that I find that there's a lack of training in firms. And if you train more, you get that effort back if the
Mhm.
training's being done right. So this training's a big deal, and really it helps manage employee resources by more accurately and correctly estimating the time need for each project or each step. The more you pay attention to this, the more accurate you are, the better you can do your capacity planning. And just in general, you just put less stress on your firm because you've got realistic expectations among your team members this way.
Well, what we've done, and I'm sure other ones have done it well, is you can put a threshold in the particular job. So if you want to be notified when the job's hit 50% of what you feel it should be, or 75%, it's a good way to intercept some of those things before they go too wonky. Now, again, I might not suggest doing it for all small jobs, but certainly for the mid or bigger jobs, you want to do that because it's more painful on those uh, than if somebody took 15 minutes longer to do W-2. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. So as it turns out, one of the things that you've done inside your product is you've got your workflows that's really color coded by employee or potentially, and then has kind of a calendar view, which is kind of an interesting way to do things. And that you've also done kind of this traditional grid view of steps, more of an Excel style. And then an additional thing that I think you added in the last 12 months or so was a synchronization into Exchange and Outlook. So not only did you have it inside TPS, but it was also in Exchange and Outlook, which means you could have it on your cell phone when you're outside of the office.
Right. So
So
we
what,
overlay it in blue.
yes,
We overlay the
talk to us a
workflow.
little bit about,
Yeah.
sorry about stepping on you on that, but talk to us a little bit about how this evolved and why those different approaches.
Well, the workflow calendar looks at what it exactly is assigned to each employee, and it gives you a rough idea of capacity planning and when they've got to get the job done. And so we did a couple of things. We put, yes, the job is due on a certain due date, but when do I expect this employee to be finished with it? Now, more so the partners tend to, pre-COVID anyways, have a lot of appointments, tax appointments, or just phone appointments in there. And so they're always shuffling back between their own workflow calendar and what appointments they have. So what we did is we built the ability to overlay the Outlook calendar over top of that individual's workflow calendar. One other feature, if I may mention it, Randy, in the grid look that we put in is the number of days since it's been in. So what we found is a lot of firms, specifically with tax returns, will have sort of a FIFO method on their 1040s so that they want a tax return out the door in 10 days. So what we would do is we'd filter on 1040s that are incomplete, that have been in more than 10 days. So we have the number of days they've been in so that none of those sort of slip through the cracks. We've gone further, like we can say how long's employee one had it, how long's employee two had it, those kind of things. But I think more importantly is just making sure we don't have a job that sit there that somebody forgot to continue on.
Yeah, your analysis, the view here is pretty good, and the filters can be, set up and saved and so forth. So there's lots of interesting management capabilities here. So instead of having, and we're not against having weekly briefing, update meetings, but it makes the meetings a lot more short as we see it. And further, you can actually handle things throughout the week and keep things moving along. So it certainly changes the style here quite a little bit. So I was quite pleased to see some of this. Now, the other thing that I know you threw inside this product in the past year or so was this step-by-step task completion methodology. And this was quite different than your old style of doing it. So what were you trying to accomplish here?
Well, I think people were expecting when they saw a workflow to create, I'll call it the job again, or the project, and then what steps did they want to monitor as progression. And part of those steps mirrored when it would be passed on to the next person, not necessarily, but could be. So they wanted a step-by-step tick box to say this part of it was done, and then we can go look at, for example, how far are we along in all the compilations, how far are we along in all the payrolls, and having a tick box. Now, the only thing I would, again, caution people is don't get carried away. Don't have 27 steps. It's not shouldn't be a how-to necessarily. It should be milestones within that particular job that you're doing. You got to remember that every time you ask somebody to tick a box or to change something, it increases the possibility of an error by them not doing it. And it requires more management internally. And we're very cognizant of this because we tend to deal with smaller firms to mid-sized firms that don't have a full-time administrator or full-time manager to cross-check everybody's work. So I think this just makes it very nice so they can, unfortunately, we don't have a slide on it, but we can see a grid view. I can see all my payrolls and see what stage each one's on, how many tick boxes they got.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, Ted. So I appreciate that because you're right. I think if I'd in retrospect, I would have caught one of those. That would have been good. So let's get another poll question in. And that's which of the following work management features are included in TPS? Due date tracking, team tasks, time tracking. Now, in this, I think you've heard us speak enough to those, and there's way more. One of the things that's hard to picture is just how broad this product is in its capability. And, and great, you guys jumped right on that question this time. It looks like all of you have answered. But since all of you have answered, I think I'll just scroll this on up and say, we think the right answer is all of the above. And that's probably appropriate way to think about that. Now, I know we've got to, Ted, continue to manage our time here. And I hate to say, but we're on slide 30 of 46, and we only got about 15 minutes left to go. We're not going to rush because there's so much more that could be said. But I think, some of the slides at the end are management slides, so we don't have a ton that we have to get through. But this topic is near and dear to my heart, and I think it is to yours too. CRM is a 4-letter word in most CPA firms. And really, we're just talking about managing business development. And, it's more than just the rainmakers and it's more than the admins. To me, this is a blend of contact management and lead management, and being able to do forecasting and maybe getting reports and dashboards. And if you're a little larger, getting niche reporting and service line needs reported out, but also being able to do sales analytics, and then further going over on into marketing automation. We see way too many firms spending money on things like HubSpot or Infusionsoft or things like that are very expensive, trying to do all this marketing automation when frankly you can work your own client base this way. So lots of things play together here in this sales forecasting, mobile sales data, and so forth. So I know that the firms that I have do business development with CRM systems generally see increases in their practice year over year over year, and they see increased partner profitability. But what do you see from your experience, Ted?
Well, again, I think it's almost bereft in the accounting world to have CRM capabilities or use. Very few firms, and again, it goes back a little bit we talked about earlier, moving accounting firms from being reactive to becoming proactive. And if you don't have a CRM capabilities, it becomes very difficult to do.
Yeah. And I'm going to pile on a slightly different piece, because a lot of consultants to profession are recommending something like Salesforce CRM. That's a bad idea as I see it. I am so against that. And, I respect the consultants that are saying those things. They get the concept, but they've got the wrong bloody tool. And there's 2 or 3 different products that, can work as CRMs that work with systems. But I like your style where it's kind of built in and it naturally extends the practice management database and keeps separate clients versus leads or contacts. And, it actually allows referral tracking and some of that stuff too. So, again, to me, it's one place to manage this stuff. And, people often will ask, well, how do you remember that person's name, or how do you know that? Well, I've been running CRM databases when I first designed ACT, the contact manager, since 1982.
Wow.
And so, when somebody wants a name, it's like, yeah, I remember that. Sometimes I remember it from up here, but sometimes I remember it from right here. And it's like, yeah, oh yeah, I know that person. Oh yeah, I see and I can see where they've been and all that. And so many of you have deep relationships with your clients, but I think it's even more helpful to have a deep relationship. And I'll just pick on a simple thing. A lot of times you have your client, but you have the spouse of the client and all their children and where they're going to school. And when you have a conversation with the client, you say, well, how's your son or daughter doing now that they went to the university 3 weeks ago? And when you say that a few times, people are taken back saying, well, how'd you remember that? Well,
Right.
you told me, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, again, one thing that was very popular and is keeping the contact's birthday in there.
yeah, very
That's
popular.
been around for a while, but we do that, of course. But I think you're spot on. If you can have that personal feel with the client, they feel you're right on top of the whole situation.
Yeah. And I apologized to a client earlier today because they'd had their 50th wedding anniversary and I didn't know it. And it's like, if I'd have known that, I'd have made it a big deal. I apologize because, it was an important client to me and I should have known. And somehow it just slipped through the cracks on me. It was even worse. I remembered their 25th anniversary, but I didn't see the bloody anniversary in my database when that happened. And so it's like, what was I thinking? I was on drugs. I was not functioning. Something. Any case. Well, see, I really part of the reason, Ted, I asked you to join is, I've looked at lots and lots of practice management products for the profession. And, I know that you get the fundamentals right on time and billing, but I think you also do well on managing clients and staff. And I think firms that use your software tend to see improvements in productivity. And I think partners have the information to, just make better business decisions. What have you seen in your base through the years on what your software has done inside practices?
Well, I think, as you say, the biggest change is trying to monitor more metrics on both employees, their productivity, their realizations, and of course the workflow aspect of it. Are we assigning the right people to the right jobs? And like you mentioned before, most of the problem is under-trained staff. So that's where the jobs tend to go sideways. Not always, but yeah, I would say the vast majority of the cases. And I don't see concerted effort, and this is probably where a consultant like yourself would come in, is explain to them that they got to train their staff properly to do the jobs, otherwise they're not going to get the return.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I spend a lot of time on service offerings too, because sometimes the firms are just missing good service offerings. But, I did want to just pull a few of these things quickly together. Your business and your product has been innovative year over year over year for quite a little while. But, it's like you guys, ate a lot of pizza and, kept people after hours and, drank a lot of Red Bull or something in this past year because you seem to have created a lot of interesting additions to the product, doing a true bi-directional QuickBooks integration. Now, there's others that say they have such a thing, some very expensive products, but I haven't found one that's as good as yours if your firm's going to use QuickBooks for the, background accounting. And then the analytics.
QBO, I just want to make that clear. It's QuickBooks Online.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for making sure I said that. I should have said it just that way too. And then number two, the Power BI dashboards that you've created in your product are quite good. There's others that are trying to get this done, but I don't think any of them have them as far along as you do at this point. Of course, reporting has been a strength inside your platform for a long time, and the advanced reporting you've got is quite interesting. A lot of client history and work codes and workflow. Obviously, we've been talking about that. The calendar and scheduling, we've been talking about that. And something that seems pretty mundane, and you actually used the words earlier, client mass mailing and emailing.
Mhm.
So you can actually choose how you deliver, marketing messages along the ways. So, I would like to have you maybe talk about a few of these things, but I wanted our listeners to get a chance to see this QBO is true bi-directional, and it is pretty phenomenal how it works. And, as it turns out that, the new Power BI dashboard is something else. And of course, you've got that client information that's, able to be pushed back and forth, including email, like we talked about earlier, and invoices and statements and so forth. So, along the way, I just thought I'd give you a chance maybe to address those. And we do have a question on your software, which I'm going to hold for just a minute, Arden, and we will cover it before we get done, but I got your question. So in any case, Ted, on these features, anyone in particular that might benefit from additional explanation?
Well, the QBO, as you said, I think we did a better job. So not only do you synchronize your clients, but what it does is you still have to bill out of TPS, because when you're billing, you're identifying WIP items, and it sends the receivable transaction into QBO. But what we also did is convert those WIP items to something called items in QBO. So the background's there, and the payment can be received by QuickBooks and it'll flow back into TPS or vice versa. So from that perspective, it is truly bidirectional. The other one I think that's really cool, and I don't know if we're the only ones out there, maybe somebody else has it, but what we did, our program sort of cracked the code. You saw the overlay of the Outlook calendar over top of the workflow. They found something, and what we're able to do is, if you send an email out of Outlook or Gmail to ABC Company from Outlook, TPS knows enough to duplicate that email and bring it into TPS. The feedback we're getting on that is probably our biggest feedback, because you can go into a client, you can see every email that was sent by any of your staff, you can see any responses. And why I think this is proving most popular is many of us have wasted time trying to keep an email thread together. And there it is.
Yeah, that's pretty phenomenal. In fact, I actually just scrolled onto the next screen to kind of emphasize that. This discovery that you've done for bidirectional linking to Microsoft Office and 365 Outlook is pretty interesting. Not to mention the full client portal and online payment mechanisms that you have. I think you've got a couple of payment mechanisms today, if I recall correctly, and more in the pipeline, or at least one today and more in the pipeline.
We got four.
Okay, so keep moving faster than I can keep up with you. So
I don't think we're going to go on forever there, because you could keep adding and adding and adding, but I think we're trying to identify the key ones that will work.
Yeah. So, the next piece that I just want to cover, and I know we're going to manage our time just a little bit here, because I've got another question. I want to answer Arden's question too. Probably we'll do it in this context. One thing to not be distracted by, I think TPS may be among the best value practice management products in the marketplace today. Now, there's a lot of vendors out there that are selling their product at $10, $15, $20 an hour. But the $9 an hour per user, or sorry, $9 per user per month products aren't even close to what's in this product at $10. And by the time you look at the features in the pro version or the ultimate version of this product, it's a phenomenal value. The $20 ultimate product is comparable to what I see in most $50 and $90 per user per month products. And so again, I'm not going to unnecessarily name a lot of products because again, you can do your own research on that. But if you're seeing products that are $50 per user per month, they're probably less capable in general than this product at $20. So don't be fooled by excellent value, because a lot of us say you get what you pay for. And in this case, you get way more than you pay for, in my mind, on TPS. So Arden, to your point, the product works in there's two different versions. There's the traditional premise-based TPS, and then they have their Cloud Access Pro, which is doing most of the heavy lifting today. So the software is web-based. And the question, Ted, was, is the software web-based, or is there a download portion to it?
No, it's strictly web-based.
Yeah, that's what I thought was the correct answer. So strictly web-based, Arden, is the answer on that. So, that brings us to the fourth question here. Which of the following analysis features are included in TPS? Advanced reporting, analytics using Microsoft Power BI, client history, work codes, and workflow, or all of the above? Now, Ted, historically, we've talked a lot about your advanced reporting. We didn't talk much about it today. Can you just comment on that while people are trying to figure out the answer?
Yeah, I think when you first look at our product, you'll see close to 400 standard reports and you think these guys are brilliant. It's not that. It's because we've been doing this so darn long. Every time a client asks for a new report, we include it. So over the years, we've developed just a whole lot of reports. And that's one of the things we respond to clients. They say they want a particular report. We talk about it. Is it specific to this client, or would everybody gain from it? And if everybody gains from it, we'll include it in the report. So we ended up with just a lot of reports in the program.
And one of the attitudes on some of the big publishers is they charge you for the custom reports. And I think your attitude has always been, does it make sense? Oh yeah, we'll build it and provide it to everybody. So, but I was actually even more impressed by the way your Power BI maybe enabled a whole lot of, I'll call it visual reporting, and drill down to the transactions, which again, I only know of your product and one other doing that right now. And so as it turns out, there's one add-on tool that's trying to do that. So, kind of there you are. Well, so I think the correct answer here looks to be all of the above. And I hope what you've done over our hour or so together is you've learned that TPS is really an easy way the product is easy to learn, and it's an easy way to manage your practice. The time entry in the product is real simple to eliminate fields you don't use, and they give clock or batch entries with search features. The billing is a fresh, clean format for quick billing and selective markups and markdowns. The invoices are, in fact, all the different forms inside this are editable in Word, and then you can send them out in PDF format. And you can look up all that client activity at a glance, from workflow to email to everything, all in one place. You just heard about the advanced reporting with 400 reports with filtering. They supply how-to training videos on each screen. And again, this new trick that they've learned on keeping client emails with every client, it's a big deal as I see it. So, today what we've tried to teach you, not only about TPS, but about practice management in general, is just ways to manage projects, engagements with the usable workflow. And I think it's important that as partners and managers, you can see conveniently the status of engagements or projects or jobs and take corrective action. We probably could have, maybe should have spent more time on the Power BI reporting to provide details on operating your firm effectively, and why that two-way integration with Outlook and QuickBooks can save time and errors. And, I'm looking forward to a time where we can run the platform here on the CPE Today webcast so people can see how it runs interactively. Or as I know, Ted, you and your team do demonstrations all the time. So you'd be happy to do a one-off demonstration for attendees as well. So that said, again, we thank you, Ted, for being along and your responses and insights. I've learned new stuff from you, which I should have known. In fact, I think in our hour, I think I learned 5 new things from you. And it's like, didn't know that. So now tomorrow I can act like I've known it for 40 years and it'll all be good.
Well, thank
But
you,
in
Randy.
case,
Thank
so
you.
remember,
Yeah.
pleased to have you along. So for those of you who are here, just make sure that you've answered those 4 questions. It looked like most of you did get that done. Otherwise, if you're listening to this in a after the fact mode, make sure you take that short 5-question quiz, and you'll get a certificate from us through K2 Enterprises. Remember, you can pick up the materials and you can look for the course code. But if this is your first podcast that you're listening to, use that one free podcast coupon code. We're out on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Follow us on those media, and our podcasts are live on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Google Podcasts and SoundCloud. And you know what? We look forward to having you back again in another podcast in the not too distant future. So we appreciate your time today, and we are so pleased to have you along. If you've got questions, let us know. We'll try to handle them as well. Thanks again, Ted.
Thank you.
Good day. Good day to all. Okay, well, I'm not exactly sure what was going on with the polling questions there today.
Yeah, me neither. It looked like somebody was closing them
Yeah, so
before
maybe
people were getting a chance to
that's what it
answer.
looked like. And